Welcome to Resilience Development in Action with Steve Bisson. This is the podcast dedicated to first responder mental health, helping police, fire, EMS, dispatchers, and paramedics create better growth environments for themselves and their teams. Let's get started.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Resilience Development in Action. I can't tell you how excited I am to meet someone again. We met through Podmatch. I like to tell people where I meet people. But I was reading, we were connected, I read it. I was like completely enamored by what her story was. And then I got to talk to her. I can tell you that when you do a pre-interview that lasts 10 to 12 minutes, like we did, that tells us how much we're going to connect probably on the podcast. Usually the ones who go like 5 minutes, you're like, ooh, I'm going to have to dig on that one. But anyway, and we had to both learn how to pronounce each other's names. So this is also really great. But Bridget Truxillo, welcome to Resilience Development in Action.
Thank you, Steve Bisson.
There you go.
See, we both nailed it.
I think it's always funny because I always ask that beforehand, and some people like repeat it as fast as they possibly can. You actually pronounced it for me, and even I showed you how I wrote it down. So it's always good to have people who understand that. Sometimes I literally need like the thing written down in order to understand.
Yeah, and I'm a very visual person too, especially with names, because I feel like my brain doesn't hold on. And so, yeah, I am with you on that.
You know, before I feel like I got to let you introduce yourself, but I'm the same way. I mean, between working on a crisis team, doing therapy, and working with the first responder world and jails for so long, when people ask me names, I'm like, Johnny, Jane.
Yeah.
I don't know. So I get the whole name thing. I don't know why, but I'll remember their story for like I already partly know your story, and I could probably tell your story. But if you ask me your name, maybe 5 days from now, I might go,
yeah. Shoot. I know.
Anyway,
same.
Bridget, I'm going to practice it. So Bridget, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Happy to do that. We were talking earlier about I live in Houston, Texas. I'm not from Texas. I say I'm kind of from the South because I've lived a lot. I moved around a lot growing up. But I'm basically from Louisiana, North Louisiana near Shreveport, if anybody knows where that is. My husband's from New Orleans, so he all the time says that I'm from Southern Arkansas, which whatever. I don't care if you say that. I have 3 kids, 3 wonderful kids, 2 girls, both about to be in high school, 10th and 9th grade. And then I have a son who tomorrow will be 9. So he's going into 4th grade. I am an attorney. I've been an attorney now for 18 years, which, wow. And I feel like that's a long time. And then I had somebody reach out to me not too long ago and said that, and this is probably, you could put on your therapy hat with this, because they said that they didn't believe that I had been in law enforcement, which I'll say this. I'm also former law enforcement, which I'll say that in a second. Didn't believe I'd been in law enforcement, or that there's any way that I had gotten all the experience that I'd gotten in the amount of time I'd been in law enforcement. So therefore was suggesting I was lying about it. And then also said that being an attorney for 18 years wasn't long enough to have a credible opinion on legal issues.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I had to just leave that one alone for a couple of days. Anyway, so I am former law enforcement. I was a deputy sheriff in Florida. So all the places I've lived includes, I moved to Florida for college. Go Gators. I'm a big Gator fan. Even when we don't have a good football team, I'm still a fan. I lived, right after I graduated Florida, I went to police academy in Gainesville and worked for Alachua County Sheriff's Office, which is where Gainesville, University of Florida is. Did that for about 4.5 years. When I left, and certainly there's a story to that, I left on purpose and for a reason. Went to law school in Miami, a small Catholic university, so that I mostly could be closer to my dad, who was in the Keys at the time, because I knew I'd be broke and could eat his food whenever possible. And then I met my husband, actually right before I started law school. He had just moved to Houston. I had family here. I came to visit, met him. We ended up dating the entire time I was in law school in Miami, and that's what brought me to Texas. So that's all of me in a nutshell.
Well, that's a lot of you in some ways. And I was going to ask you where you're originally from, South Arkansas. That makes sense to me. And sorry, I told you pre-interview, my in-laws, so to speak, are from Austin. So go Aggies. So, but it's okay. Florida is I think they're in a different conference now. So we're good.
Yeah. And you would offend a lot of Aggies in that because the Longhorns are in Austin, UT, and A&M is the Aggies. And I'm not a fan of either. So actually, I encourage you to say that the Aggies are in Austin. I think it's funny.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know where they are, but I also now
Doesn't
that
matter.
I have an 18-year-old now who's going to UConn, so go Huskies.
Yeah, basketball. I like it.
I mean, yeah,
Yep.
so I have a lot of choices. I just can't say where my alma mater is because McGill is in Canada, and people will be like,
Yeah.
they never played. So,
Yeah.
but by the way, the comment that you got, I don't want to communicate too long about this
Yeah.
because you can't diagnose someone you don't know, but
Right.
it's got personality disorder written all over it.
Yeah.
And I'm not a doctor, so I can say this. Maybe there's part of their anatomy that's too small in order felt very, very threatened by you. But anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Well, I would agree with all of that. And certainly big girl enough to know that I don't need to take on your problems, buddy. So don't, if that's your opinion, I obviously very much disagree with their assessment of my experiences. And the only thing I did say back to him, good luck with your show. And certainly don't appreciate you questioning my credibility. But, have a nice life. You know, not going to
Uh,
get into it.
I don't want to
Yep.
get in. I don't want to get into either about how possibly it's a gender thing too, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, I can certainly agree with that.
Because
Yep.
girls can't really be in law enforcement, as I understand it.
Certainly not SWAT team. And,
Yeah.
we'll talk about that I used to be I was on SWAT team for 2.5 years. And that's the part where he just didn't believe me. Like, you know what? I could offer 25 guys as witnesses to that, but I'm not even going to bother offering that information to you because, it's not worth it.
So, okay, so how does this woman who goes to school in Florida decides, gee, I want to become a police officer and also go for SWAT? What goes from that to the woman that decides to do that? I'm really lost, actually.
And to back it up even further is that I graduated with a degree in horticulture. So
Oh,
if you
even better questions now.
So when I was in college, like, and you have an 18-year-old, like they expect you to, and we're all there. If you go to college, you got to pick what your degree is going to be. Well, how do you know what that's going to be? I mean, there's certain few people in this world, I think, that are very clear on what they want to do when they grow up. Or like my niece knows she wants to go, I think she wants to be a vet or something. So like she's very clear on that. And when she goes into school, and that definitely could change. But I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I chose, well, this is dating me. The movie The Firm with Tom Cruise was very popular at the time. And I thought, well, that's cool. I'll go to law school and also he was a tax attorney, which I can guarantee you that most tax attorneys don't run off to the Cayman Islands to go find some records and get chased by the mob and all this kind of stuff. Well, I went to college and thought, wait, tax attorney. That sounds awful. Never mind. And I thought, well, I'll choose engineering. My uncle's an engineer and he's a nice guy. No idea what engineering was about or how many maths and sciences and physics class you'd have to take for that. And not that I was incapable of doing those classes, but in my 4th year of college, I was in agricultural and biological engineering. I chose that particular engineering because I thought, oh, that'll take me outside because I just never envisioned myself being an office person. And then all of those maths and sciences and things really sucked and thought, well, shoot, I don't know what I want to be an engineer. And one of my really good friends was in horticulture, and I thought, well, I like plants. And I chose that because I talked to the horticultural school, and they said that they would take all of my maths and sciences as my electives, and that all I would need is one more year of their core classes, and I could graduate. So I was like, sweet, I'll do that. Well, then come time to graduate, and I thought, shoot, I don't really want to do this plant thing forever. And also dating myself, and it's kind of a joke. G.I. Jane with Demi Moore came out at the time, and I thought, that's cool. I'll go try to be a Navy SEAL and shave my head. And I joke about that, and I say all the time, like, no disrespect to any Navy SEALs and how serious and difficult it is to get through that program. But also dating me is when I had that idea, women weren't even allowed to try out for the
Wow.
SEAL program. They are now. I also have some very strong opinions on whether, like, women being in those type of specialty units But I was young. I was really into being, working out. And I didn't know if, like, part of what drew me to law enforcement, and nobody in my family's ever been in law enforcement before. Two reasons. One is because I believe in the rule of law. I believe in right and wrong. And I believe that's a very honorable profession, just like the military, to help us all live in a safe society and holding people accountable when they do something wrong. It's the same way I raised my kids. If you do something wrong, we're going to talk about it, because you got to understand that there's consequences to actions, good and bad. Take responsibility when you do something wrong and learn from it and don't do it again. But, I think I'm a decent parent and that I'm teaching my kids to be good people. And I think that law enforcement and the military go out there and sort of play that role a bit. Like, you hold people accountable when things go wrong so that it can be better going forward. So I definitely wanted to do and I say, like, I'm a dork in the way that, like, I truly believe in, like, a lawful society. I believe in our Constitution, and no system's perfect, but I think it's a pretty darn good one. And then secondly, I wanted a job that would require me to be fit, because although I would work out a lot in my 20s, I didn't know if I would have the motivation to stick with that. And now I can say 20 something years later, 51 years old as of last week, and I still work out regularly. So, and also, it's true what they say about law enforcement and donuts. It really is not, for the most part, not a very healthy bunch. So I got into the job and realized, wait, these guys aren't really that fit. And I was also just a real proactive cop. And so I did patrol, and within a year, I was in undercover narcotics unit, because I did local law enforcement because I thought I wanted to do federal. And to get to federal, I wanted to get experience. So I went into the narcotics unit because there was no women on the unit. They wanted one and needed one. That was me. And then a couple months later, I tried out for SWAT team because there was an opening on that. Again, from a very, I like to do hard things, obviously.
No.
And obviously, there's a very strong physical component to being on SWAT team, and I made SWAT team. So did that for about I was narcotics for 3 years, SWAT team for about 2.5, until I left, because while being on SWAT team was the coolest thing ever, I was the only female member they'd ever had and have not had one since. And I say, as though I loved it, it's also the reason why I quit law enforcement altogether. For all of the reasons you would expect, being the only female in a specialty unit like that. So.
Just a quick break. Guys, I'm going to talk about a new product that I really like. I actually bought one of their hoodies. It was amazing, and I really enjoyed wearing it. This episode is going to be supported by Deemed Fit. Deemed Fit is a first responder-owned activewear and leisure brand. And one thing that I genuinely like about them is that they support different causes. I actually gave a few people I know who work with first responders or nonprofits their name to Deemed Fit, and I know they're talking to them. They do a lot of initiatives and collections that are based on mental health for first responders. And if you go there right now and you buy anything, including the mental health support stuff, use the code RDA15. That's right, RDA15 to get 15% off on any products that you get. Again, it's called RDA15. Go to deemedfit.com, DEEMEDFIT.com, and enjoy 15% off at checkout to save. Now, right back to the episode. That's a long answer, but now, like, you just intrigued me with your ending of that answer. Like, what, goes a little bit to maybe talking even about how do we go from SWAT to deputy sheriff to, we're going to talk about that, and then to employment attorney. But you said, all the stuff that we know that happens on the SWAT team, being an only woman on the team and all that. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest with you. I'm the type of guy who, like, let's say what it is, because I think that sometimes we say, oh, we know, but do we? And I think what I mean by that is everyone knows about, like, oh, you know what it is to be a spouse of a first responder. Mm-hmm. You do, but what does that really mean, right? So yeah. I don't know where you want to go. I definitely would like to know more about the difficulties that you talked about, and how do you go from there and deputy sheriff to becoming an employment attorney, because it sounds like your career went from horticulture to being an attorney.
Yes. Horticulture was just a matter of doing something to get that stupid piece of paper, which is right back here behind me, that you can't see, but it actually has orange and blue trim on the piece of paper. I just have all this paper behind me is very expensive.
Yes.
But because I Obviously, graduated from college, went to law school much later. I mean, there's a gap in between, obviously, but then I've actually taken 4 bar exams. So that's why I have all these papers behind me. But so being a female on a SWAT team, I mean, just being a female in law enforcement,
Yes.
it is predominantly men and also firefighters, less of a difference in EMT. Definitely dispatch is predominantly women. Corrections, so corrections, firefighter, law enforcement, predominantly male. And like in law enforcement, I can say it's roughly around 13% women, give or take some
Yeah.
agencies. And it's obviously a very macho profession. It's a paramilitary profession. And with that, mostly men, and it's a tough job and it's a physically demanding job. And so do I think women can do the job? Absolutely. Are they physically capable of handling it? Yes. You have to be very aware of what your strengths and weaknesses are. And as a female, I would never, ever have, not by choice, tried to take on a guy by myself. I was always very good at getting back up before I had to arrest somebody or, any situation where it was going to, and you just have that feeling like, I need to get back up for this. And especially in SWAT, but just being in that profession in general is women are just different. They're wired different. They're built different. We respond to issues differently. And that's not bad, but that difference is always there. It's apples and oranges. An apple's not better than an orange, but they're never going to be the same.
Right.
And I think too many people, I think women especially, they go into this thinking, oh, I can prove to them I can do this, and then they'll treat me the same. No, they're not. You're always going to be different. And obviously going into SWAT, like I knew that. I knew what I was doing. I knew that I was going to be the only female. And and I'm 5'5", and I'm not going to tell you what I weigh, but I mean, I don't remember what I weighed then. Luckily, it's not that much different now, 25 years later.
Good for you.
Thank you. And
after 3 kids, even more impressive.
Yes, after 3 kids. What I think is that you think that you can do this, you think you can prove them and that you can do the job, and that eventually they'll accept me. Eventually they'll consider me one of their equals, and that's never going to happen. In my case, it's that I feel like it's that you just can't wrap your head around that this female is here and that she can have a role on the team.
Right.
And what happens is they just never really accept you, never really accepted me. Every mistake I made was always a bigger mistake than anybody else's. I was just constantly being written up. Every mistake I made was documented. And at first you think, oh, okay, I made a mistake. I'll do better tomorrow. You're like, oh, gosh, darn it, you're right. I'll do better tomorrow. But after 2.5 years, I started thinking, screw you. Go write up that guy who just made the same mistake I did, but nobody said anything about it. And I think it's hard for people when you think, well, I did make a mistake. But the reason why I became an employment law attorney is because I needed an employment law attorney when I was at the sheriff's office. And I never reported it. I never did anything about it. And then that meant that I quit the job that I thought I was going to do for the rest of my professional life. That's not what I wanted to do. Yes, I went to law school. That's not a bad thing, but I had no idea what to do with that. And it took me 13 years, I would say, to really find direction professionally because of basically being run away from the sheriff's office. And so it was harassment, discrimination, retaliation. When the one time I did try and tell to my lieutenant, who's also my SWAT commander, and say, look, I'm not asking for better treatment. I just want equal treatment. And I gave him an example as generically as I could. Like one of the guys somebody made a mistake and I did something similar and you wrote me up and you put a letter in my file. Like I'm not trying to get somebody in trouble and I'm not trying to get myself out of trouble, but this should be the same.
Right.
And he went to my team, my SWAT team, who I'd been training with for 2.5 years, and told them I was trying behind my back and said I was trying to rat out one of my own teammates, and they all started calling me a snitch behind my back. So it was heartbreaking, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, and I quit probably 4 months after that. And so fast forward 13 years, 13, 15 years later, even though I was so mad at all of them and I never wanted to be a cop again, I still wanted to do something with law enforcement because I just felt purpose there, like I said. Right. And what I discovered was, and especially after the summer of 2020, when George Floyd died, and everybody hated law enforcement, and all of a sudden we were all murderers. And I say we just because I still consider myself part of the population. And that made me really, really mad because 98 to 99% of all law enforcement are really good people who make good decisions on a regular basis and are not trying to kill anybody. And I was mad about that for a couple of weeks. And then just the way that I am, like the sun comes up tomorrow, let's be positive Polly about it. What could we do? And what I decided is how could I help? Well, what can I do for law enforcement to see, no, we're not murdering people, but is there something we could do to do better? How can we be better? How can we make a positive impact in our community some way? And the way that I realized I could do that is, well, law enforcement and first responders already have a mental health issue. Well, how can I help with that? Well, like I do a lot to take care of my mental health, and a lot of that revolves around exercise because that's like a mental health tool for me. And so I thought maybe I could put together like a mental health program, but then I realized that's not really my lane. And my lane is being an attorney. And I know that when you have a problem at work, it is consuming. That's all you can think about, talk about. That's the way I was. And I knew I could help with that. So that's how I ended up. I was already an attorney for a long time, decided to start my own firm. Actually, didn't want to start my own firm. I just wanted to do this kind of work and realized nobody else was doing it in this way. And so I started my law firm to help law enforcement and first responders address and handle the problems they're having at work, because I know that becomes a mental health problem, and I don't want that to be the thing that pushes you down that negative very slippery slope. So I've very much created my own law firm as a mental health tool, and it comes from that place of to be able to give you answers, and it's somebody you can trust, and it's a confidential place of trust, similar to you, where, with therapy, is they want to be able to tell somebody their problems and if they don't want to, it doesn't have to get back to their department, because that really does provide them an unbelievable amount of relief. And I know that because I have clients and spouses and moms and people emailing me all the time saying, thank you so much for what you're doing. Like a wife emailed me 2 weeks ago and said, I can see that this is physically see this is released, lifted a burden off of her husband's shoulders just because I'm here answering questions for him and telling him what he should do and that he can trust me. So again, a very long answer, but having gone through it and been in the culture, and I think that makes a big difference. From your profession, they seek out somebody who's culturally competent, somebody who can understand what the culture is about, because they're also very leery to put a burden on somebody else who doesn't understand the culture, who doesn't understand the things that they've seen. And they want to be able to unburden it somehow, but they have to be careful who they do that with. So I love what I do. For you as well, too, that I am taking on a lot of people's problems, and I worry about them, and I worry that I'm not doing enough for them. But it comes back to I know I'm a trusted source, and I just want them to know they have somebody who's listening and know you're not crazy, and I'm here to help you.
Well, all I can think of is privileged communication, and that's what lawyers have as well as first responders. For therapists, for first responders. And I think that having that privileged communication is so essential, in my opinion. I think that plays a huge factor. I honestly was listening to you, and all I can think of is we have a series of podcasts that we could do together. I honestly thought that while you were talking, because there's so many things. The uniqueness of your experience with law enforcement, your uniqueness of being in the law firm and understanding mental health. And then let's add the layer of being a woman in the law enforcement field. I mean, there's so many things there that to me, I can go on and on about. Like I said, I have 12 more questions, not even kidding. But the uniqueness of mental health issue, law firm, first responder. And then you added something that's also near and dear to my heart, family. Because family members always get neglected, and they don't you might walk the thin blue line, but that thin blue line is very thin when you go through hell and back.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the things that comes to mind. And recently looked up, I know it's from 2013, so the number's a little old. But when you look at how many law enforcement people across the United States get in trouble versus how many don't have a record, don't get anything, don't have any problems, it's 90% of law enforcement doesn't have a problem at any point in time in their career. It doesn't indicate how long all those careers are. But the
Right.
point I make with people is it's interesting that we concentrate on the 10% of law enforcement, and then within that 10% of law enforcement that goes wrong, we make it much bigger than it should be because, a cop in Texas does something wrong. So obviously the cop in Idaho sucks.
Yeah.
And makes no sense whatsoever because it's the same discrimination that people will say about gender or race or socioeconomic or LGBTQIA stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I can go on and on because I think that we have, like I said, I seriously think we have a series of podcasts just between me and you. But I
Yeah.
think that might be important to go back to, well, I have a problem with my work at my department, at my sheriff's office, whatever. Let me talk to the union.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I hear, from what you're telling me and what I've always thought, but it's nice to hear someone who's in both sides to understand that. I always tell people, like, no, your union doesn't know shit. You need to go to talk to a lawyer who may have a better understanding of that. So I don't know if that's part of the challenges that first responders face in that workplace, but it's one of the first things I want to throw out because they always talk about unions, but I think talking to a lawyer is as important as talking to a union.
100%. And I feel like I could scream this from the rooftops every day, every single day of the year for year after year. I'm not anti-union. I was in a union when I was at the sheriff's office. Depending on which state you live in, you have more protections than others. Like I'm in Texas or Florida, where I was in the sheriff's office is the same. They're at will states, so they don't have the same like statutory labor law rules as somewhere like Massachusetts, or I've had many clients out of Illinois where if you like get terminated, you have specific rights by law to aggrieve it or appeal it or things like that. But I tell people all the time, like, join a union. You can afford it. And if for no other reason, you get protection if you ever get criminally indicted for something. Because I promise you can't afford a criminal lawyer.
Yeah.
You're going to need it. And then you're going to end up having to sell your house and mortgage everything you own and try and pay for it. But also, they do help you, even in an at-will state. Union reps or union lawyers are going to help you if you're getting investigated by internal affairs in the disciplinary process. They can help negotiate less or more, or help you write your statement if you're going to have to write a statement. But what they don't do, and I don't want to say 100% of the time, but awfully darn close to 100% of the time, they don't do employment law. And what I mean is, let's say you're being investigated and you're being disciplined it's sustained and you're going to get some discipline or whatever. And your union lawyers can help you with all that. And your union lawyer might say, oh yeah, I think this is discriminatory. You should do something about it. But they can't help you do anything about that. They're not going to be able, maybe they'll help you write up a statement to report that. And that's one of the things I'll tell everybody. And that's why I like sign up for my newsletter, shameless plug, because once a month I try and give you just quick little tips on things you need to keep in mind if this is happening to you. Is number one is you've got to write it down. And number two is you've got to report it internally. Because legally, they're not required to do anything about your problem if you don't. And what I mean by report it is, I mean, you have to say, I think I'm being discriminated against because I'm female, white, hurt, Jewish, pregnant. I mean, whatever it is, but you have to explicitly say it out. And I say in writing, like an email's fine. I'm not saying you got to snail mail something. Do it if you want to. I don't care. But you've got to, in writing, email or otherwise, put them on notice of what the problem is. And maybe your union lawyer will review what you want to write, but they can't report it. They can't do that for you. And then what if you want to file an EEOC claim or the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission? That's the way, like if you are facing one of those things, you have to file something first with either the state or the feds, because you can't sue before you file that first. So if you ever want to sue somebody because it's so bad, you're going to have to file one of these EEOC or state equivalent claims. And so that's where I think people go wrong is, and especially I hear this from a lot of people in the Northeast, because the unions are much more powerful with collective bargaining agreements and such. They'll say, no, you don't want to do that. Or no, let's do this first. Let's wait and see how it goes. Well, especially in the Northeast, like I think I talked to some people in the Northeast who were like, yeah, I've been on paid leave for a year and a half while they try and sort this out. I'm like, well, that's great, but your 300 days is up. You might not ever be able to file an EEOC claim because you've missed the date. Now, that may or may not be true, and there's a lot of what ifs in the legal world. Right. But you have timelines, and it's strict. Like if I want to file that same claim in Texas, I have 180 days. If I want to file it with the feds at the EEOC, it's 300 days. But if it's day 301, it's too late. You can't ever file it. And so that's where the problems come in is one is that they say, well, that's not what they do. So they don't really know those timelines necessarily. Two is they'll say, well, let's wait and see how this happens. And then, again, it's the statute issues. But three is they'll say things like, do you really want to do that? I wouldn't really want to fight that battle if I were you. And that's completely wrong. At the very least, book a call with somebody who does know this law very, very well and says, okay, but here are your options. And then you can decide. And that's really, one is, you can't, I don't do free calls anymore, just so you know. You call us, you're going to have to pay for it. You get 30 minutes because we're going to give you answers in that call. You get an attorney on the phone. You don't get just some intake paralegal, or it's not even a paralegal. Intake's below a paralegal. You get an actual attorney on the phone to listen to the problem that you can, as much as we can in a 30-minute call. And then they're going to tell you, yes, you can do something about this. We can help you. Or here's what you need to keep in mind. No, you can't. And here's what you need. But if this happens. And so you're going to get answers, and we're going to say, yes, you should. And your union guy is wrong, or your rep. And again, I'm not bashing unions at all. I think you should be in one. And also, if it's employment law related, you need a specialist for that. It's no different than saying well, I brush my teeth every day, so I don't need to go to the dentist ever. No, because they can make it. We were talking about teeth earlier, you and I.
Yeah.
So I'm bringing that back in. But I say, that's you need to go to the specialist. I'm an attorney, but I'm not going to write your will. I'm going to send you to somebody who specializes in that. And so, yes, unions are great, and they just can't do everything. So, and if you need help, you already know. And right. Maybe you ask, should I go talk to somebody about this? And even if your union people says, no, you don't need to do that. No, you don't. Don't do that. Yes, you do. And you already know that. So just find somebody and have a conversation.
So many things that come up for me here. One of the things is that, while we talked about the 90-10 earlier, unions are well-intended. I, of course, being in the Northeast, I see a lot of union people and a lot of good stuff comes out of the unions. And I'm pro-union for the most part. And what I mean by that is sometimes I'm not. Yeah. We'll leave it at that. You can call me if you want to know my views on that.
I certainly have some union horror stories for sure. But yeah, I agree with you.
But I think in the union, and maybe we can go the other half and start maybe talking about this, but I'm going to throw it out so that we'll leave a little cliffhanger. One of my pet peeves is that sometimes the union is in bed with the admin because they're out for themselves. So I know that I'm going to be leaving you all on a controversial ending, but I'd like to talk a little bit about that because that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Bridget, but that happens a lot.
It does. Yeah.
So how about we go in the next half hour if you're willing to stay for another half hour?
Yep.
And for those of you who are finishing on this first part of the episode, I will see you on the next episode. And for those of you who enjoyed this interview, Bridget, where can they find you just so that they know?
Yeah, best place to find everything, resources, sign up for the newsletter, social links is my website, ladylawshield.com. If you need to book a call, that's the first thing you see on the top of the page. But all the resources, the different ways we can help, the type of work we do, and like I say, social media links, it's all there, ladylawshield.com.
And I will be putting that in the show notes, so please join us on the other side for the next episode.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States and Canada.